The colony whispered her name like a curse. No one dared to speak it too loudly, as if even the sound of it would bring her fury upon them. She was not like the others. She was not broken, not weak, not silent like the slaves the colony had tamed before. She was fierce. She was untamable. In the cage where she was kept, her eyes glowed like fire, sharp and dangerous, warning everyone to stay away. Her hair, dark and wild, fell over her face, but her piercing gaze still cut through the bars. She had scars across her arms and shoulders, marks of battles she had fought and survived. Every guard who stood too close to her cage carried wounds they would never forget. Some bore claw marks on their arms. Others still limped from the kicks she had given them. She was not a prisoner. They called her a beast. The colony leaders tried everything to break her spirit. Chains were placed on her wrists, heavy collars locked around her neck, but she tore through them with strength no one believed possible. They starved her, thinking hunger would weaken her. Yet even when her stomach growled with pain, her eyes never lost their fire. They shouted commands at her in languages she barely understood, but she never obeyed. She spat at them, snarled at them, and sometimes let out a scream that echoed through the entire outpost, sending chills down every spine. Untamable, the guards muttered. She will never bow. Better to end her than to keep her. But the leaders didn't end her. They kept her locked like a wild trophy. To them, she was proof of their power, that even a creature so fierce was under their control. Yet the truth was clear to everyone. They did not control her. They feared her. The colonists told stories about her at night. Children whispered that she was half demon, born from fire and shadow. Traders claimed she was cursed, that her blood could burn anyone who touched it, and some swore they saw her eyes glowing even in the dark, watching, waiting. She became less a woman and more a legend, a warning never to challenge her. But legends are dangerous, because legends inspire. One day, as the crowd gathered near the cages for the evening auction, whispers spread quickly. People came not to buy her. They knew she was impossible to own. But to see her, to stare at the alien woman who had fought entire squads of men and still lived. To marvel at the creature who refused to break. She sat inside her cage, her knees pulled close, her face hidden behind her hair. But when footsteps approached too near, she lifted her head. The crowd froze. Those burning eyes met theirs, filled with defiance. Her lips curled back, showing sharp teeth. The message was clear. Come closer, and she would tear them apart. The guards jabbed spears through the bars to keep her still, but she did not flinch. Instead, she grabbed one of the spears suddenly, ripping it from the guard's hand. Gasps echoed through the square. She spun the weapon in her grip, her movements smooth and deadly, like a warrior who had trained for years. Before the guards could react, she snapped the spear in half with her bare hands, threw the pieces on the ground, and let out a roar that shook the onlookers. "Beast!" someone shouted. "Monster!" cried another. Yet no one could look away. Fear and awe held them in place. The leaders only laughed from their platform. "Untamable," they announced proudly, as if her wildness was entertainment. "No man can master her. No one can take her in. She is nothing but fire." But among the crowd stood a single man who did not laugh. A human, tall and steady, his eyes fixed on the cage. While others saw a beast, he saw something different. He saw not just fury, but pain hidden behind it. Not just strength, but loneliness carved into every scar. The alien woman noticed him. For a moment, her fierce glare softened, only a little. His gaze did not flinch, did not look away like the others. She tilted her head, confused. Why did he not show fear? Why did he not mock her like the rest? The guards shouted, breaking the moment. They threw chains through the bars, forcing her back into the shadows of her cage. The crowd began to leave, still whispering about the wild woman who could never be tamed. But the human stayed where he was, watching silently, as if already making a decision no one else would dare. The alien woman pressed her hand against the bars and stared at him until he finally turned away. And though she made no sound, her heart beat faster, restless and unsure. For the first time in years, She had met a gaze that did not see her as a monster. The colony thought they had contained her, locked her fire behind iron bars. But they had no idea that the story of the untamable alien woman was only beginning, and somewhere in the shadows a human man had already decided he would step where no one else dared. The marketplace was alive with noise, traders shouting prices, guards barking orders, and people rushing from one stall to another. Yet, in the center of it all, the cage of the untamable alien woman stood like a storm in the middle of calm waters. She crouched inside, her burning eyes watching everything, daring anyone to come closer. Most people kept their distance. Even the guards holding their weapons looked uneasy. Then, through the crowd, the human man stepped forward. He looked ordinary at first glance. He was not dressed like a soldier, nor did he carry any weapon. His clothes were plain, the kind worn by workers in the colony. But his eyes, they held something unusual. Where others looked at the alien woman with fear or hatred, his gaze was steady, unshaken. He studied her like one studies a storm, not with panic, but with a quiet respect for its power. The colony leaders noticed him and smirked. Another fool, one muttered. They had seen men approach her cage before. Some tried to control her with threats, some tried kindness. All had failed. Some ended up bleeding. The human walked until he stood directly in front of the bars. The crowd hushed. Even the alien woman, who usually growled or hissed when anyone dared come too close, tilted her head in curiosity. She rose to her full height, taller than most humans, her shoulders broad, her muscles sharp beneath her skin. Scars lined her, arms like medals from 100 battles. She stepped forward, her hands curling into fists, her jaw tight. Her eyes burned into his. The human didn't move back. Instead, he spoke. "I don't fear you." The crowd gasped. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Guards gripped their weapons, expecting her to strike at any moment. But the alien woman froze. Her nostrils flared. Her body trembled, though not with rage. Something else, something she did not understand. The leaders laughed loudly. "You'll be dead in seconds, human. She cannot be tamed. She is wild, like an animal." But the human didn't take his eyes off her. He leaned closer to the bars and said, quietly but firmly, "You're not an animal. You're a warrior. I see it in your eyes." The alien woman's lips parted slightly. For a moment, the fire in her eyes flickered. She wasn't used to words like these. Most called her beast, monster, curse. No one had ever called her a warrior. One guard shouted, "Step back, fool!" He raised his spear toward the human, but the man didn't move. He stood still, his voice calm. "I want her," the human said suddenly. His words fell like thunder in the market. The entire square erupted in laughter. Traders doubled over, guards sneered, and even the leaders smirked with disbelief. "You take her? She will rip you apart before the sun sets." "She is untamable," another spat. "Even we cannot control her. What makes you think you can?" The human's reply was simple. "Because I won't try to control her, I'll give her a home." The laughter grew louder, echoing off the colony walls. To them, his words were madness. A home? For a beast? Impossible. But the alien woman. She heard every word. Her heart, long buried under layers of rage and pain, beat faster. She studied, his face searching for mockery, waiting for cruelty. She found none. His eyes were steady, his voice carried no fear. For the first time in her life, she felt something strange, a flicker of hope. The guards pushed forward. "Enough," one barked. "She is not for sale, she is too dangerous." The leader, however, waved a hand. A sly smile spread across his face. "Let him try. Let the fool have her. He will not last the night. And when she kills him, the crowd will know the truth. She is nothing more than a beast." The human nodded once. He did not argue, did not boast. He simply said, "Open the cage." The guards stared in shock. "Are you mad? She will tear you apart." "Open it," the leader ordered, laughing. "Let us see how long he survives." The crowd pulled back, eager to watch the show. Eyes widened, hearts pounded, breaths held. The creak of the iron lock echoed across the square. Slowly, the cage door swung open. The alien woman stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the ground. Her gaze never left the human. She was free, at least for the moment, and every muscle in her body told her to strike, to end this fool who dared stand so close. Her hands curled into claws, her teeth pressed against her lips. The crowd waited for blood. But then she stopped. Inches away from the human, she froze. Her fire met his calm. Her strength clashed with his stillness. And in that silence, something shifted inside her. The human extended his hand. Not a fist, not a weapon, just an open hand, steady, patient. Gasps filled the air. The crowd could not believe what they saw. No one had ever dared offer her a hand before. It was madness. It was suicide. The alien woman's chest rose and fell. Her eyes narrowed. For a heartbeat, it looked like she would strike him down. But instead, she tilted her head, confused. Why did this human not fear her? Why did his hand not tremble? Her own hand twitched, almost against her will. She did not take his hand, not yet, but she did not strike it away either. The leader's smile faded slightly. The crowd leaned closer, and the untamable alien woman who had never bowed, never obeyed, never softened, stood still before a human man, silent, curious, and unsure. It was the boldest step anyone had ever taken in that colony, and it was only the beginning. The colony watched in silence as the human led the alien woman away from the cage. Some laughed, certain that he would not survive the night. Others whispered bets on how long before she tore him apart. But the human did not look back. His steps were steady, and the alien woman followed behind him, her eyes burning, her body tense like a predator ready to strike at any moment. He brought her to his small house on the edge of the colony. Unlike the tall iron buildings in the center, his home was simple, built with stone and wood, surrounded by wild plants. It looked more like a place for peace than for war. Inside, there was no cage, no chains, no weapons waiting for her, just a table, a chair, a small fire, and shelves filled with things she didn't understand. Books, tools, and little objects that seemed meaningless, but somehow important. She stepped inside, her muscles coiled tight, her eyes scanning every corner. This was no prison. There were no bars to hold her back. Freedom was within reach. She could strike him down and disappear into the wild lands beyond the colony. Every part of her screamed to escape. The human closed the door softly and said only, "This is your home now. No one will hurt you here." Her head snapped toward him, her eyes sharp with disbelief. Home. That word was nothing but dust to her. For her, there had only been cages, chains, and battles. A home was something she had never known. She growled low in her throat, warning him not to come closer, but the man didn't flinch. He placed food on the table, a bowl of stew, steam, rising from it. The smell filled the room, rich and warm. Her stomach twisted painfully. Hunger clawed inside her, but her pride was stronger. She turned her head away, refusing. He didn't force her. He sat at the table, eating quietly, not looking at her like she was an animal, but like she was simply another person in the room. That confused her more than chains or spears ever had. Why was he not afraid? Why did he not try to control her? Hours passed. She circled the room like a caged beast, though there were no bars. She picked up objects, studied them, then threw them aside with frustration. She smashed one of the chairs against the wall, testing him, waiting for his anger. But he didn't shout. He didn't strike her. He only sighed, picked up the broken pieces, and set them aside. At night, she sat in the corner, her back against the wall, her eyes never leaving him as he lay on his bed. Sleep tugged at her, but she resisted. She had learned long ago never to trust. The moment you closed your eyes, That was when pain came. So she kept watch, her breath slow, her mind restless. The human spoke into the quiet. "You are not my prisoner. You are free here. If you want to leave, you can, but if you stay, this place will be yours too." Her chest tightened. She didn't answer. She didn't know how to answer. Free? The word was strange, like a sound from another world. She wanted to laugh, to roar, to say freedom was a lie. Yet his voice was calm, steady, and something in her heart stirred, something long buried. The next day, when he offered food again, she glared at him, testing. He placed the bowl near her and walked away, sitting outside the house to give her space. Her hunger grew unbearable. Her pride fought against it, but in the end, her hands moved on their own. She lifted the bowl, tasted the stew, and felt warmth spread through her chest. When the human returned, he saw the empty bowl. He didn't smile or mock her. He simply nodded as if it was the most natural thing in the world. That made her frown. She didn't understand. Why was he treating her as if she had chosen, not obeyed? Days passed like this. She tested him again and again. She slammed doors, broke dishes, and shouted in her own language words he couldn't understand. Each time she expected anger. Each time he answered with patience. Slowly, the fire inside her began to shift. It was not gone, but it no longer burned, only with rage. At night, she sometimes watched him by the fire. His face looked tired but kind, his hands rough from work, his eyes calm even in silence. He was not like the others who caged her. He was not like the leaders who laughed at her. He was something else. One evening, when thunder shook the sky and rain poured outside, she sat near the fire, hugging her knees. The storm reminded her of battles long past, of screams and blood. Her chest ached. For the first time, she let out a sound that wasn't a roar or a snarl. It was soft, almost a whimper. The human looked at her but said nothing. He only placed another blanket near the fire and returned to his work. She stared at the blanket for a long time before slowly pulling it over her shoulders. The warmth made her tremble, not from fear, but from something she didn't recognize. Comfort. That night, for the first time in years, her eyes grew heavy, and she let herself fall asleep. The human did not chain her. He did not guard her, yet she did not run. Deep inside, a feeling she had never known began to grow, fragile but real. She was still the fiercest woman in the colony, untamable in the eyes of others. But in this small house, surrounded by silence and firelight, she had found something she never expected, the beginning of a home. The days inside the human's home passed slowly, yet each one felt different from the last. The alien woman, once the fiercest and most feared creature in the colony, still carried fire in her eyes. But in this place, that fire flickered in new ways. She was not chained, yet she didn't leave. She was not guarded, yet she stayed close. The human treated her as if she was more than a beast. He gave her food, space, and silence when she needed it. He never forced her to obey. She didn't understand him, but little by little, she stopped destroying everything in his house. She sat by the fire more often now, staring into the flames, though her eyes sometimes drifted toward him. Then came the night that changed everything. The storm arrived without warning. The sky split with lightning, and the colony shook with thunder. Rain fell hard, hammering the roof, flooding the streets outside. Inside the house, the fire crackled, throwing shadows across the walls. The alien woman sat near the flames, her knees hugged tightly to her chest. The storm outside made her restless. It reminded her of battles she had fought, of cages rattling, of screams echoing in her memory. Her claws pressed into her skin, her breath heavy. The human, meanwhile, was outside, securing the wooden beams of the roof against the raging wind. He worked quickly, but the storm was wild, and one wrong step sent him crashing down. She heard the sound, a dull thud followed by a sharp groan. Her head snapped toward the door. For a moment, instinct told her not to care. He was only human. If he was weak, let him fall. That was the law of survival she had always lived by. But something inside her chest twisted painfully. Against her will, she rushed to the door, flung it open, and stepped into the rain. There he was, lying on the ground, clutching his side. Blood ran down his arm where a wooden shard had pierced his skin. He tried to rise, but his legs shook. The alien woman froze in the doorway. Rain poured over her face, mixing with the fire of confusion in her eyes. She could run now. He was weak, wounded, unable to stop her. Freedom was only steps away. The wildlands beyond the colony called to her, yet her feet did not move toward the forest. They moved toward him. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling. He looked up, his lips pale, but his eyes still calm. "You should go inside," he whispered. Her chest tightened at the sound of his voice. She snarled in frustration, not at him, but at herself. Why was she doing this? Why was she choosing to stay? Her claws hesitated above his wound. She had never tended to anyone before. Her hands were made for tearing, not healing. But when he groaned again, something broke inside her. She tore the fabric of her own garment, pressing it hard against the bleeding wound. The human winced, but did not push her away. "Thank you," he whispered softly. The word hit her harder than any weapon ever had. Thank you. No one had ever spoken those words to her. She was used to curses, to orders, to chains. Gratitude was something she had never tasted. The storm raged above them as she pulled him to his feet, supporting his weight on her strong shoulders. He leaned on her, blood staining her skin, but she didn't let go. Step by step, she carried him back into the house. Inside, she lowered him to his bed. He looked weak, pale, yet still calm. He tried to smile through the pain. "You are stronger than they know," he said quietly before closing his eyes. She sat beside him, her chest rising and falling fast. Her hands were still red with his blood, her heart racing with feelings she didn't understand. She had fought armies, broken chains, and defied every order in her life. But this small act of care felt like the hardest battle of all. For hours, she stayed by his side. Every time he stirred, she pressed the cloth tighter, refusing to let him fade. The fire burned low, shadows flickered, and the storm outside began to soften. But inside her chest, a new storm raged, a storm of questions. Why had she not left? Why had she saved him? Why did his pain feel heavier than her own? When the night finally grew quiet, she leaned back against the wall, her eyes still locked on him. She whispered something in her own language, words she hadn't spoken in years. They meant, "Do not die." The human did not hear her, lost in fevered sleep. But the sound of her own voice startled her. For so long she had only roared and snarled, her voice used for rage. Tonight it carried something else, fear, hope, and something she dared not name. Morning came with soft light through the window. The storm was gone. The world outside was calm again. The human still slept, his breathing shallow but steady. The alien woman sat close, her claws no longer clenched. Her eyes were softer, though confusion still lingered. She had broken her silence, not with anger, but with care, and though no one else would believe it, the fiercest untamable woman in the colony had done the unthinkable. She had chosen not to run, not to fight, but to protect a human. And deep inside her wild heart she felt it. Something was changing. Morning light crept into the small house, painting the walls in pale gold. The storm had passed, leaving silence behind. The alien woman sat beside the bed where the human lay. His face was pale, his breathing uneven, but he was alive. She had kept him alive. Her claws rested on her knees, her sharp eyes fixed on him. She did not move, did not sleep. Every sound outside, the footsteps of guards, the cries of traders, the call of birds, made her tense. But she stayed. She had fought wars, broken cages, and faced death without fear. Yet this quiet waiting, watching over a human, felt heavier than all of it. When his eyes finally opened, weak but clear, She exhaled in relief without realizing it. He turned his head, his lips curling into a faint smile. "You didn't leave," he whispered. She stiffened. She wanted to growl, to deny his words, to say she stayed only out of curiosity. But the truth echoed in her chest. She hadn't left, because she didn't want to. He tried to sit up, groaning from the pain in his side. Immediately, she pressed a strong hand to his shoulder, forcing him to stay down. Her eyes narrowed, as if scolding him. He chuckled softly, even through pain. "You're fiercer when you're protecting than when you're fighting." Her jaw tightened. She didn't know what to make of his words. Protecting. That was not something she had ever done. Survival had always been her only path. And yet, last night she had chosen him over freedom. He reached out weakly, his hand trembling. Slowly, he rested it on hers. His skin was warm, fragile compared to her calloused strength. She flinched at the touch, but didn't pull away. The contact. It was strange, almost unbearable in its gentleness. "Thank you," he said again. Those two words made her chest ache in ways battle never had. She quickly pulled her hand back, retreating to the corner of the room, glaring at him as if daring him to speak again. But her glare lacked its usual fire. Days passed like shadows drifting across the sun. The human grew stronger, though the wound kept him weak. The alien woman stayed in the house, watching him with silent suspicion. Yet slowly, her suspicion began to turn into something else. When he cooked food, she no longer refused it. At first, she ate only when he wasn't looking, tearing into the bread and stew like a starving animal. But later, she sat across from him at the table, her eyes lowered, chewing slowly as if testing this new thing called trust. When he worked outside repairing tools or cutting wood, she followed him. Not too close, always keeping a distance, but close enough to leap in if danger came. The guards noticed her presence, whispering among themselves. "The beast follows him now," they muttered. "She waits for the right time to kill him." But none dared to get too close. The human didn't treat her like a guard dog, nor like a prisoner. He spoke to her as though she could understand, even if she didn't always know the words. He told her about the colony, about the stars beyond, about simple things like planting seeds and fixing roofs. His voice was calm, steady, like the hum of fire in the hearth. She pretended not to listen, but her ears caught every word. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the ground, he limped to the doorway and leaned against the frame. "They'll come for you again," he said quietly. "The soldiers, the leaders, they won't stop until they drag you back." Her eyes narrowed, a low growl rumbling in her throat. She was ready for that fight. But then he added, "If they do, I won't hand you over." Her chest tightened. No one had ever stood between her and danger before. People had always stepped aside, eager to see her chained, eager to see her beaten. This human, weak and wounded, was the first to say he would resist. She didn't answer, but her silence carried weight. For the first time, she saw him not as prey or captor, but as something else, an ally. That night, she didn't sleep in the corner. Instead, she sat closer to his bed, near enough that if danger came, she could strike before it reached him. Her claws rested on the floor, her back against the wall, her eyes open. And when he turned slightly in his sleep, murmuring her presence gave him peace. Her heart beat harder than it ever had in battle. The bond between them grew not with words, but with shadows, in the silence of nights, in the quiet of shared meals, in the unspoken gestures that passed between them. Something stronger than chains formed. But outside, the colony buzzed with anger. The leaders whispered plans. The guards sharpened their weapons. They could not allow this, an untamable beast choosing a human. It was dangerous, shameful, threatening their control. The alien woman felt it. Her instincts told her the storm was coming, a storm worse than the one that had raged over the colony. But when she looked at the human, still weak but unbroken, she made her choice. If the soldiers came again, she would not run. She would not fight alone. For the first time in her life, she would fight for something other than survival. She would fight for him. The days of quiet did not last. The colony had grown restless. Whispers spread like fire. The beast lives with a human. Some laughed, calling the human a fool. Others grew angry, saying he had stolen what belonged to the leaders. But the guards, the ones who had once bled under her claws, whispered in fear. They had seen her stand silently beside him, her fire no longer wild but steady, and that terrified them more than her rage ever had. At night, the human could feel the danger closing in. He had lived in the colony long enough to recognize the shift in the air. People avoided him in the streets. Soldiers lingered near his home longer than before, their hands always near their weapons. He knew it was only a matter of time, and he was right. The attack came on a moonless night. The alien woman was sitting near the fire, sharpening a piece of broken metal she had claimed as her own weapon. The human was resting, his wound not fully, healed but better than before. Silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of flames. Then, shouts. The heavy thud of boots outside. The crash of doors being broken open in the distance. The colony guards were moving house by house, but their voices grew louder, their steps closer. The human's eyes darkened. He tried to rise, but the alien woman was already on her feet, her body tense, her ears sharp. She could smell them, fear, sweat, steel. A loud voice roared outside the house. "Open the door, human. By order of the colony, hand over the beast." The human's jaw tightened. He glanced at her. She was already baring her teeth, her claws gleaming in the firelight. For once, her fury was not for him. It was for them. He stepped forward, placing himself between her and the door. His voice was calm, but it carried steel. "She is not yours. You will not take her." The soldiers outside laughed. "Do not play the hero, human. Step aside and we will spare you. Resist and you die with her." He didn't move. Instead, he reached for the wooden beam and dropped it across the door, locking it shut. His heart pounded, but his eyes never wavered. The alien woman stared at him, her chest rising and falling fast. No one had ever stood in front of her like that. No one had ever shielded her. Something burned in her chest, hotter than fire, sharper than rage. The soldiers didn't wait. With a roar, they smashed against the door. Wood splintered, dust fell, the walls shook. The human braced himself, but he knew he could not hold them for long. The alien woman let out a snarl that shook the room. She pushed him aside, not in rejection, but to stand beside him. Her eyes glowed with fury, her voice deep and sharp cut through the chaos. "We fight." The door exploded inward. Soldiers stormed in, armored and armed with spears, chains, and stun rods. They expected to face a wild beast. Instead, they found a warrior, and a human standing at her side. The first soldier lunged, his spear aimed at the human. Before it could strike, the alien woman moved like lightning. Her clawed hand shot out, snapping the shaft in half. With a roar, she slammed the soldier into the wall. Another swung a chain at her. She caught it mid-air, yanked the guard forward, and threw him across the room. The impact shook the floor. The human fought too. He was not as strong, not as fast, but he fought with heart. He grabbed a fallen rod and swung it with all his strength, striking one soldier across the jaw. Another came at him with a blade, and though he stumbled, the alien woman was there, her body blocking the strike, her claws ripping the weapon away. The house filled with chaos, shouts, screams, the clash of steel, the crack of wood breaking. But in the middle of it, something powerful was clear. They were not fighting alone. They were fighting together. The soldiers expected her to turn on the human, to use the chaos as a chance to escape. Instead, every strike she made was to protect him. Every roar was for him. The untamable beast had chosen her side. The leader of the guards pushed through the doorway, rage burning in his eyes. "Enough! Kill the human, then she will lose her reason to stay." Hearing those words, her blood boiled. A sound rose from her chest, deeper than any roar she had ever given before. She launched at the leader with unstoppable force. Their clash shook the entire room. He struck with his rod, electricity sparking, but she took the pain and kept moving. With a scream that echoed like thunder, she threw him across the fire pit. Smoke and flames burst into the air, filling the house with sparks. The soldiers stumbled back, fear finally replacing their courage. The human raised his voice, loud and unshaken despite the chaos. "She is not your beast. She is free." The soldiers hesitated, stunned by the sight before them. This human and the wild alien woman standing side by side, firelight painting them in gold and red. She stood tall, claws ready, teeth bared. He stood firm, bleeding but unbroken. The guards retreated slowly, dragging their wounded leader with them. Their eyes showed fear now, true fear. They had not faced a beast. They had faced something far more dangerous, a bond. As the last soldier stumbled into the night, silence fell. The fire crackled, the air thick with smoke, the floor littered with broken weapons. The human leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. The alien woman turned to him, her fierce eyes softer now. She reached out, hesitated, then rested her clawed hand gently on his shoulder. For the first time, she was not untamable. Not because chains bound her, not because fear broke her, but because she had chosen, and her choice was him. The night after the attack was heavy with silence. The human's house stood half broken, the door shattered, the walls scorched with fire. Weapons and blood stained the floor, yet inside, in the glow of the dying embers, something stronger than any wall remained unbroken, the bond between the human and the alien woman. She sat near him, her shoulders still tense, her claws stained from the fight. He was wounded again, his arm cut, his side bruised, but his eyes, though tired, carried no regret. He looked at her with the same calm he always had. "You stayed," he said softly, her head tilted. Her lips parted, but no words came. She was not used to speaking, not used to being seen. For most of her life, she had been called beast, monster, curse. But this man, he saw her, not as a cage to be locked or a threat to be destroyed, but as something more. For a long moment, she only stared at him. Then she placed her hand on his, careful, hesitant. Her claws could tear through stone, but tonight they touched him as gently as falling rain. When dawn came, the colony gathered outside the ruins of his home. People whispered, their eyes wide, their voices full of fear and awe. They had heard the battle. They had seen the guards retreat. And they had seen her, the untamable alien woman, standing not alone but beside a human. The leaders stepped forward, fury burning in their faces. "This cannot be allowed," one shouted. "She is a beast, not a woman. She must be taken or killed." The crowd murmured in agreement, but some hesitated. They had seen her fight. She had not killed the human. She had not turned on him when she had the chance. Instead, she had fought for him. That truth made them uneasy. The human stepped out of the broken doorway, his body weak, but his voice strong. "She is not your beast. She is not your prisoner. She is free. And if you want her, you'll have to go through me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. He was only one man, unarmed, wounded, yet he stood as if an army was behind him. And in a way one was. For behind him, the alien woman emerged, tall and fierce, her golden eyes glowing like fire. The crowd fell silent. Even the leaders trembled. She was untamable, yes, but no longer wild with rage. She stood with purpose now, her fire no longer scattered but focused. And that made her more dangerous than ever. One leader spat on the ground. "She will never be one of us. She is cursed, untamable, dangerous." The human's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then perhaps she is not one of you. Perhaps she is something greater." The alien woman didn't understand every word, but she felt his tone. She saw the way he stood, refusing to bow. Something inside her stirred, something she had thought lost long ago. Pride. Not the pride of rage, but of belonging. The leaders tried to rally the guards, but the men hesitated. They had already tasted her fury. They had already seen her fight, not as a beast but as a warrior. None dared to step forward. Slowly, the crowd began to step back. Fear kept them silent, but deep inside, awe had taken root. The untamable alien woman had not bowed to chains, and now she stood untamed even in freedom. But she had chosen a side, and it was not theirs. That night, the human and the alien woman sat together in the ruins of the house. The firelight flickered between them. For the first time, her shoulders softened. For the first time, she allowed herself to breathe without fear of the next strike. She turned her head and studied him. His face was scarred, tired, yet steady. He had given her what no one else ever had, not chains, not orders, not fear. He had given her choice, and she had chosen him. Carefully, she spoke in her own tongue, her voice low and rough. He could not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. They were words of belonging, words of home. His hand found hers, steady and sure. She did not pull away this time. The days that followed were not easy. The colony watched with suspicion. The leaders seethed with anger, but no one dared to challenge them again. The story had already begun to spread beyond the walls. Travelers carried whispers of the wild woman who once tore through cages, now walking beside a human man. Some called it madness. Others called it a miracle. For her, it was neither. It was survival, but survival of a different kind. No longer the survival of claws and teeth, but survival of the heart. She was still fierce. She was still untamable. But her untamable spirit had found something new. Not chains, not walls, not battlefields, but peace. And in the quiet of nights, when the fire burned low and the world outside grew still, she no longer sat in the corner watching him with suspicion. She sat beside him, her head resting lightly near his shoulder, her fire no longer a weapon but a light that warmed them both. The colony had called her a beast, cursed her as a monster, and feared her as untamable. But in the end, she became something far more powerful. She became human in the only way that mattered, not by blood, not by name, but by choice. And so the fiercest woman in the colony, once caged and chained, found what she had never known: peace in the heart of a human.